Las Vegas looks different at night. The neon signs flicker like heartbeats, the streets pulse with false promises, and every shadow has a story. My story begins with a police radio crackling in the silence of 2:13 a.m., dust swirling under the headlights of our black unmarked vehicle as the heat still clings to the night like an unwanted memory. My name is Riley Carter, 29 years old, Homicide Division, Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. Everyone in the department knows two things about me. I don't miss details, and I don't get attached. That second one became a rule, carved into my bones after the kind of relationship that forces you to choose between your heart and your badge. I chose the badge. I live alone in a one-bedroom apartment with bare walls and blackout curtains. I keep my coffee strong, my emotions distant, and my life compartmentalized. Until she arrived. The first time I saw Detective Jordan Wells, she was standing in front of Captain Rhodes's office, leaning casually against the doorframe, holding a paper cup of coffee, smiling at absolutely nothing. She was waiting for me, though she didn't know it yet. She had just transferred from San Francisco, and the captain was assigning her as my new partner. My immediate thought, unacceptable. My second thought, which I never said aloud, dangerous. She had one of those smiles that didn't belong in a precinct, too warm, too open. She had long chestnut brown hair tied in a loose ponytail, strands falling around her face like she had better things to do than fix them. Her eyes, hazel, sharp, and unsettlingly observant, didn't miss a thing. Not the flicker of annoyance I tried to hide when introduced. Not the way I kept my arms crossed. She held out her hand. Detective Wells. Apparently, you're stuck with me. I shook her hand. Firm, professional. Detective Carter. Apparently. She grinned. Too charming. Too comfortable. But then she said something that made me hesitate. I read your case files, she said casually as we walked down the hallway. You're good. Efficient. Methodical. You don't waste time with assumptions. I didn't answer. She wasn't wrong, but it annoyed me that she already thought she knew me. You read my case files? I asked, raising an eyebrow. She shrugged. I read all the files. Helps me understand how people work. I didn't tell her that I never read files to understand people. I read files to understand what they hide. That was the first difference between us. She wanted to read people. I wanted to dissect them. For the first month, our partnership was strictly professional. We learned to work around each other's methods. She was intuitive, quick to pick up behavioral patterns. I was analytical, detail-oriented, looking for inconsistencies, the little cracks people didn't want us to see. She noticed that I didn't like small talk. So she stopped trying. She noticed that I didn't ask personal questions. So she didn't offer information about herself. We weren't friends. But slowly, inevitably, we became something important. Trust. Real, unspoken, heavy trust. We worked nights. Night patrols are different, colder, lonelier, more honest. The darkness strips away your pretenses. She was quiet on those nights. Unlike during the day, when she was charming, quick, full of energy, after midnight, she was still. Like something in her came alive only when everything else went silent. One night, around 1:45 a.m., we sat in the car on surveillance duty outside a motel in the desert outskirts. The suspect was a gang affiliate, accused of a triple homicide with suspected gang retaliation brewing. We watched the entrance quietly. She didn't speak for almost an hour. Then, she broke the silence, like she had been thinking about it for a while. The thing about the city, she said softly, is that people think the danger is in the alleys and the casinos. But it's not. She looked out the window. The real danger is that people forget who they are here. Her voice wasn't playful, not insightful, not trying to impress me, just true, and incredibly sad. I didn't look at her, but I felt something shift. I didn't know it then, but that was the moment everything began to change. After that night, I started noticing her in ways I didn't want to. The way she relaxed every time we drove past old neighborhoods. The way she always hesitated before entering a high-end casino, even though she walked confidently through crime scenes. The way she seemed to instinctively understand victims, really understand them. I also noticed how she watched me. Not like others did. Not like I was intimidating or impressive. She watched me like she was trying to figure out what I refused to say. Dangerous, I warned myself. And then came the case. The one that changed everything. The one that exposed her, and exposed me. A suspected money laundering ring operating out of a luxury casino, the Mirage Bar and Suites. We were called in for undercover surveillance. The captain said we'd need to blend in, observe interactions between the suspects and their clients. We weren't going as detectives. We were going as a wealthy young couple on their honeymoon. I objected immediately. It wasn't just the proximity. It wasn't just pretending to be emotionally involved with someone who had already started to feel too close. It was something I couldn't name yet. Something heavier. You're the best observational pair we have, Rhodes had said. You read behavior. She reads emotion. Together, you'll see everything. Jordan didn't protest. She watched me instead, waiting to see my reaction. I agreed, eventually. Bad decision. Or maybe the best. I still don't know. On the night of the undercover, something about her felt different. Out of uniform, she didn't look like Detective Wells. She looked like someone I didn't know, and that terrified me. She wore a deep emerald satin dress that caught the casino lights like water. Her hair was down, cascading loosely over her shoulders, soft waves brushing her collarbones. Her makeup was subtle but warm, highlighting the hazel in her eyes, making them look brighter, sharper. She didn't look approachable. She looked breathtaking. I almost didn't recognize her. Until she smiled. Soft, hesitant. A smile just for me. And something in my chest tightened. She looked at me differently. Like she saw more than she should. I wore a black suit. Simple, sharp, efficient. She straightened my collar and whispered, "Don't worry. I'll follow your lead." She said it like a promise. But that night, I wasn't leading. I was reacting. We walked into the casino hand in hand. That was part of the cover. But her hand was warm. Steady. Real. Too real. Every part of the operation was maintained with precision. We watched. We observed. We collected information. We blended in. But then I slipped. Not professionally. Emotionally. It happened in a moment too small to matter, and yet it changed everything. A suspect passed by us, glancing. Jordan slid her hand across my back, leaning into me, pretending to whisper something into my ear. A simple cover gesture. But her hand lingered. Warm. Soft. Comfortably firm. Not part of the cover. For a split second, I forgot we were pretending. And when I turned to look at her, she wasn't acting. Not fully. Her eyes held mine unguarded. Like she had been waiting. The rest of the night blurred into tension I couldn't name. And then came the moment that changed it all. A suspect approached us, too close, demanding proof that we were a real couple. His eyes were sharp, suspicious. "Kiss," he said. I expected a fake kiss. Quick. Mechanical. Professional. What happened wasn't that. She lifted her hand, fingers softly brushing my cheek, like she already knew the shape of it. Her eyes met mine. No hesitation. And then she kissed me. Slow. Gentle. Soft. But intentional. Real. My chest tightened. My pulse stuttered. And I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Something I had sworn I would never feel again. Safety. And something dangerously close to home. When she pulled away, her breathing was quiet, but her eyes weren't. They were loud. Too loud. We didn't talk about it. Not inside the casino. Not going through the exit. Not even when we got back into the car. But silence had changed. It wasn't professional anymore. It was alive. Heavy. Electric. Real. And that was the moment I knew something had broken through. Something I could no longer control. Something I wasn't sure I wanted to control at all. The night after the casino operation felt different even before it began, as though something in the air had shifted, something subtle but undeniable, like the moment just before a storm touches the desert, silent, electric, heavy with expectation. I walked through the dimly lit hallway of the precinct, the faint hum of vending machines and low voices in distant cubicles filling the lonely early hours, my boots echoing on the polished floor. I wasn't thinking about the case. I wasn't thinking about the suspects or the new lead Rhodes had told us about. I wasn't thinking in that controlled, calculated way I always did. I was thinking about the way Jordan's hand had rested on my back in the casino, the softness of her touch, her breath close to my ear, and her eyes, God, those eyes, after she kissed me like she had meant it. Not just for the cover. Not for the job. It was intentional, real, and I knew it. The worst part, and by worst I mean the part that terrified me, was knowing that something inside me had responded. Not the way it should for a cover. Not the way it should for a detective. It had responded like a woman. When I entered the operations room, she was already there, leaning against the edge of the table with files spread around her, hair down just like it had been that night, loose waves framing her face and brushing her collarbones. She didn't wear the emerald satin dress now. She wore a simple black shirt tucked into dark jeans, a badge clipped neatly at her hip. But somehow, she looked even more disarming. Natural. Effortlessly confident. When she lifted her eyes to me, she didn't look away. She held the stare. That was new. She didn't force a smile like she usually would. She didn't start with a casual comment or a joke. She just watched me, like she was trying to see if I would pretend nothing had changed. But something had. That was the problem. Morning, she finally said, and her voice was softer, less playful, but not unsure. Just different. Morning, I answered, but my voice was too controlled, too professional, like I was hiding behind it. She noticed. Of course she noticed. She always noticed. She didn't press further. She simply turned back to the case files, but the air between us had shifted in a way I couldn't name. The silence felt heavier. It wasn't tense. It was charged, like two magnets slowly turning toward each other. Captain Rhodes briefed us on our new assignment, monitoring a suspected network of illegal transactions connected to the casino we infiltrated. The suspects were careful, using intermediaries, coded transfers, front businesses, and Rhodes believed someone on the inside was feeding them information. There's a new name in the files, Rhodes said, dropping a folder on the table. M. Wells. The name hung in the air like a silent explosion, and without even thinking, my head turned to look at Jordan. She didn't react, not visibly, but tension flickered in her eyes for half a second, like a shadow passing through them. Smooth, controlled, but there. And that was when I knew something about this case touched her past. And I had no idea what. We don't know who M. Wells is, Rhodes continued. The name might be coincidence. But we need to look into it discreetly. Discreetly. That meant two things. Trust and secrecy. And the only people assigned to this case were me and Jordan. When the briefing ended, she didn't move right away. She stood still, her hands loose at her sides, but her eyes distant, like she was somewhere else. Not in the room. Maybe not even in this city. I wanted to ask, but I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I grabbed the file and walked out of the room, expecting her to follow. She did, but not immediately. She stopped in the hallway, watching me, silent. Then, without warning, she spoke. You didn't sleep. It wasn't a question. It was observation. I didn't respond, so she continued. You've had that look in your eyes since the casino, like you're thinking too much, but not about the case. Her voice was soft, careful, like she didn't want to disrupt something fragile. I didn't turn to face her. I kept walking. We should focus on the case, I said firmly. She followed silently for a few steps. Then she spoke again. Did you feel it? I stopped walking. Completely. The hallway was empty, the buzz of the vending machine the only sound nearby. She had stopped behind me. Love what you've seen so far and want to help me keep creating these awesome stories on this channel? Then subscribe and hit the bell. Your subscription supports the channel and makes sure you get more exciting stories. I could feel her presence like warmth against my back, even though she hadn't touched me. Slowly, I turned around. She was watching me, eyes steady, unguarded now, no amusement, no mask. Just truth. And vulnerability. Real, raw vulnerability. In the casino, she continued softly, when I kissed you, did you feel it? My chest tightened with something I couldn't control. I could have lied. I should have lied. But detectives don't lie, not to each other. And certainly not to themselves. So I stayed silent. And silence was an answer. Her eyes softened, but they didn't break contact. Not even for a second. Instead, she stepped closer. Slow, deliberate, controlled. I didn't move back. My heart was beating too fast, too hard, like it had been set on fire and didn't know how to put itself out. When she was just a breath away, she didn't touch me. Not physically, but emotionally. Her presence felt like a touch, warm and grounding. We don't have to talk about it, she whispered. But don't pretend it didn't happen. And just like that, she turned and walked away. My feet didn't move. My breath didn't return to normal. My pulse didn't slow. Something deeper had cracked open, and I didn't know how to close it again. Not sure I wanted to. That night, we drove in silence, the strip glowing like an artificial sunrise in the distance. The radio crackled with routine patrol calls, but we weren't listening. At least not to that. I was hyper-aware of every little detail, the slope of her shoulders, the way her fingers tapped slowly on the steering wheel, the way her gaze occasionally lingered on me. She wasn't looking at me like before. Something in her gaze had changed, like she wasn't just seeing me, but understanding me. And that scared me more than anything. Around 2:38 a.m., we responded to a disturbance call at an abandoned lot near the old industrial district. When we arrived, the scene seemed empty, just wind brushing against broken fences, trash swirling across cracked asphalt, the distant hum of traffic from a nearby highway. But something felt off. We both sensed it. Jordan stepped ahead, flashlight scanning the darkness. She was quiet, not hesitant, but thoughtful. Usually, she talked her way through observations, thinking aloud, connecting behavior to motive. Tonight, she said nothing. She moved like she knew this place, like it was familiar. Too familiar. And then, out of nowhere, she stopped. Not because of what she saw, but because of what she remembered. I've been here before, she whispered. My breath caught. When? She didn't answer right away. Her eyes weren't looking at the lot anymore. They were looking at something 7 years in the past. San Francisco wasn't my first choice, she said quietly. I transferred there because I couldn't stay in Nevada. Because someone I knew, someone I loved, disappeared here. I stared at her, silent, the world narrowing down to her voice, her words, the truth finally unraveling. I didn't just transfer to Las Vegas, she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. I came back. And in that moment, I understood something important. The name, M. Wells. The sudden shadow in her eyes. The unspoken weight she carried every time we drove past places like this. She hadn't just come here to be my partner. She had come to find something. Or someone. She turned to look at me then, not hiding, not guarded, not charming. Just real. I never told anyone, she said softly. But I trust you. The streetlights flickered nearby, casting shifting shadows across her face, but her eyes, God, her eyes, were steady and warm and brave. And that was the moment I realized that the most dangerous thing I had ever faced wasn't a criminal, or a chase, or a gun pointed at my head. The most dangerous thing was standing right in front of me. And for the first time in a very long time, maybe ever, I didn't want to run from it. The night had a different weight after Jordan's confession, a weight that didn't just settle in the silence, but seemed to move between us, alive, pulsing, growing like something fragile and dangerous that neither of us had the courage to name. For years, I had believed that danger came in the form of guns, knives, and lies whispered in interrogation rooms. But now, standing beside her in that abandoned lot, realizing that she had trusted me with something no one else knew, I felt the kind of danger that didn't aim for your life, but for your heart. The city felt quieter than usual, not because it was, but because I was listening differently, not just to the street sounds, but to her breathing beside me, steady, controlled, almost unnaturally calm, like she had spent years learning how to lock her emotions behind invisible doors. But tonight, something had slipped through the cracks. I didn't ask her more. Not yet. We didn't speak again on the ride back to the precinct. We didn't need to. Something had shifted between us. Not in the way that fire suddenly ignites, but more like ice beginning to melt. We weren't partners on autopilot anymore. That night, she wasn't just Detective Wells. She was Jordan. And that was entirely new territory. The next day, everything looked the same, but nothing felt the same. The fluorescent lights still flickered in the hallway near the evidence rooms. The smell of burnt coffee still lingered in the break room, and Sergeant Lopez still mumbled the morning crime report like every other day. But when I walked into the operations room and saw her hunched over the files, hair falling over her face, I noticed something different. She wasn't looking at the paperwork. She was staring through it, like the information wasn't just evidence, it was memory. She looked up the moment I entered, not with surprise, not with her usual casual grin, but with something quieter. Relief, maybe. Like she had been waiting for me. I didn't ask her if she had slept. I didn't need to. The faint shadows under her eyes told me enough. She didn't ask me how I felt after the casino night. She didn't need to. My silence told her everything. We sat side by side, studying the files connected to the case, but I could feel her pulse in the air, not fast, not nervous, but deep, steady, deliberate, like someone preparing to open a door they had kept locked for years. Finally, she spoke. His name was Michael, she said quietly, eyes fixed on the table. He was my brother. The name, M. Wells. Not an accomplice. Not a criminal. Not a suspect. Her brother. She continued before I could speak. He disappeared 7 years ago. He was 19. Smart, competitive, always curious about things he shouldn't get close to. Her voice didn't shake, but her hand tightened slightly around the pen she was holding. We were born in Nevada. Not in Vegas, but nearby. We used to come here sometimes. Michael liked the city, liked observing people, especially the wealthy ones. He said they wore their secrets like expensive coats. Everyone could see them, but no one could take them away. She smiled faintly, but there was pain there too. He had a theory that the people who were most desperate to look legitimate were usually the ones hiding something rotten underneath. I stayed silent. I knew how to listen, not just to words, but to absences, to what someone didn't want to say. And right now, she wanted to say it, but she needed time. She continued. One night, he came to Vegas to meet someone. He didn't tell me who, just said it might be big. Illegal, but big. Her breathing changed, shallow, careful. He was supposed to come back the next morning. He never did. The room felt too still. Even the walls were listening. There was an investigation, she whispered, but it was sloppy. Filed as a runaway. No evidence of foul play. No credible leads. No one cared enough. He was just another missing young man in a city full of ghosts. Her eyes lifted to mine then, painful, unguarded, raw. But I cared. She didn't cry. She didn't flinch. She didn't break. She didn't need to. Emotion lived in her voice like a heartbeat, steady and aching. I didn't reach for her hand, even though I wanted to. I didn't touch her shoulder, even though my fingers twitched with the urge. Instead, I did something harder. I let silence be enough, because sometimes silence was the loudest form of understanding. When she finally closed the file, something changed in her eyes. Not pain anymore, but determination. Steel. I called every detective on the case, she said quietly. Every lead. Every record. Every piece of surveillance. Nothing. Her jaw tightened. Except one thing. She opened the folder again and pointed to a grainy still image from casino surveillance footage, time-stamped 7 years ago. It showed a young man, brown hair, tall, slender, entering a high-stakes poker room at the Mirage. The same casino we had just infiltrated. The same casino where we had kissed. Not because we had to, but because something deeper had already started to pull us together. He was inside the same casino, she whispered. The same one. And with her hand still on the file, she looked at me, not like her partner, not even like her friend. She looked at me like someone who had already made a choice. And she was waiting to see if I would make mine. That night, we drove back to the Mirage. Not as detectives. Not in disguise. Not as a fake couple. Just as two women following a lead that was bigger than either of us alone. Inside, the casino was buzzing. Laughter echoing near roulette tables, glasses clinking at crowded bars, cards shuffling, neon lights reflecting off polished marble floors. But the noise felt far away, because all I could hear was her voice beside me, saying the words softly, but with absolute conviction. He was here. Her hand brushed mine, not intentionally, not fully, but enough to feel like a spark. A real one. Slow. Spreading. Dangerous. We stopped near the same staircase, where she had leaned close to me days before, where her hand had rested on my back, where her lips had touched mine. But now, it wasn't tension. It was understanding. Of her pain. Of her search. Of the fact that she wasn't just looking for answers. She was looking for closure. And maybe for someone to walk that road with her. She looked around slowly, almost reverently. "Do you ever feel," she whispered, "like some places remember people, even when the world forgets them?" I didn't look away from her. Yes. She turned, and this time, when our eyes met, she didn't hide anything. Not pain. Not fear. Not the way she was starting to feel about me. And I didn't hide either. Not confusion. Not fear. Not the way I was starting to feel about her. For a long moment, we stood there, no roles, no armor, no badge, no distance. Just truth. And for the first time in years, I didn't fear it. I let it exist. And that changed everything. Las Vegas glowed like a living lie that night, all glitter and neon, all disguise and illusion, the kind of city that looked most alive when people were too tired to see clearly. It was 3:08 a.m. when we stood across the street from the Mirage, not as detectives, not as infiltrators, not pretending to be lovers. We just stood there, side by side, with the quiet knowledge that we were crossing a different kind of line tonight, one that had nothing to do with badges and everything to do with truth. There was a slight desert breeze, warm and unhurried, brushing across Jordan's hair, lifting strands of chestnut brown under the golden casino lights, catching in the shadow of her jawline, softening her normally sharp gaze. She didn't look like Detective Wells tonight. She looked like Jordan, someone who had a past, a question that had been haunting her for 7 years, a disappearance that didn't fade just because the case file said closed. "This is where he was last seen," she whispered, her voice low but steady, like she was speaking to herself more than to me. "He walked in through that front entrance at 11:30, 2 p.m. And he never came back out." She didn't blink. She didn't move. For a second, she didn't even breathe. And that was when I saw her not as my partner, but as a sister. As someone who had been living her entire life in the space between searching and grieving, unable to fully do either. I didn't speak. I didn't reach for her hand, though I wanted to. Instead, I stepped closer, not touching, but near enough that she could feel my presence, grounded and unwavering. "Then we start here," I said quietly. "Not as detectives. Just as people who need answers." She looked at me then, not grateful, not surprised, but something else entirely. Something that felt like understanding, like connection, like the moment before two people stand too close and don't step back. Something dangerous. Something new. We crossed the street in silence, and I swear, this time the casino seemed different, like it could feel why we had come, like it remembered. Inside, everything was noise. Poker chips chiming, glasses clinking, air conditioning humming, laughter echoing across velvet-draped floors, silk dresses sweeping by like whispers. But beneath it all, there was something else. A story that hadn't ended. A ghost that hadn't been named. A secret that someone wanted to keep buried. We weren't looking for suspects tonight. We were looking for footprints in time. Jordan moved differently now, not professionally, not strategically, emotionally. She paused near the east corridor. He stopped here, she whispered, eyes scanning the hallway lined with gold trim and expensive carpets. She took a deep breath. There's no footage from this hallway. The cameras were, magically, offline for 57 minutes. I frowned. Convenient. Intentional, she added. We walked further into the corridor, past the Baccarat lounge, past the mirrored wall reflecting our silhouettes walking side by side. Not detectives now, but two people haunted by the same unsolved silence. Our reflection looked almost like the couple we had pretended to be that night. Except now, we didn't have to pretend. We reached the far end of the corridor, near a polished door with no signage. Private only. Restricted access. She stopped. Her breathing changed. Not fear. Recognition. I stepped beside her, close but not touching. You've been here before, I said softly. It wasn't a question. She nodded. Once. Years ago. Before I left Nevada. It was closed to the public. A private room. I thought it was just a rumor. But it wasn't. No, she said, barely a whisper. It wasn't. She pressed her palm gently against the door, not opening it, just touching it, like it held a pulse. This place, she whispered, this exact door, shows up in 2 separate surveillance stills from the night Michael disappeared. But no record of what's behind it, I murmured. She shook her head. No access logs. No staff records. Almost like it didn't exist. But it does. Yes, she said, eyes lifting to meet mine. It does. We stood there, no footsteps, no laughter, no casino noise, just us, suspended in a kind of silence that didn't feel empty. It felt full. Full of things unsaid. Full of questions. Full of possibility. I turned to face her more fully, breaking every one of my own rules about distance and control. We're not just working this case anymore, are we? She looked at me, eyes soft and unguarded, and shook her head slowly. No, and then something shifted. Not in the casino. Not in the case. In us. She stepped just a little closer. My pulse jumped. Not panic. Not fear. Something deeper, something that felt dangerously like calm, but with heat under it, like embers that had been waiting for oxygen. I haven't told anyone about this, she whispered, eyes searching mine cautiously, like she was afraid of being too open too fast. Not Rhodes. Not Lopez. No one. Why me? I asked and I meant it. Her answer came without hesitation. Because you don't run from things that hurt. She didn't say it like a compliment. She said it like a truth. A truth she had been staring at for weeks, waiting to see if I would admit it too. I didn't answer, because there wasn't an answer. There was only silence. And silence, between us, was beginning to mean something entirely new. Later, back in the car parked across the street, the desert heat lingering in the early hours, she leaned back in her seat, exhausted, not physically, but emotionally, mentally, like she had finally allowed vulnerability to exist, and her body didn't know what to do with that weight. She turned her head, slowly, deliberately, and looked at me, not guarded, not witty, not deflecting. She looked at me like she was seeing me for the very first time. And I felt it like a current, like warmth, like something unspoken but incredibly loud. It wasn't romantic. Not yet. It wasn't physical. Not yet. But it was something. Something real. Something that had been circling between us since the casino kiss. Not a spark from nothing, but the awakening of something that had already existed, quietly, waiting. She didn't speak. I didn't speak. For 2 full minutes, we didn't speak. We just looked. And when she finally did break the silence, she didn't talk about the case. Or her brother. Or Vegas. Instead, she asked the most dangerous question of all. Does this? Her voice broke, softer than I had ever heard it. Does this feel different to you? I swallowed. The truth burned its way up before I could stop it. Yes. She didn't look surprised. She just nodded slowly. And then, very slowly, she turned away. Not out of fear, but because we both knew something had started. Something slow. Something deep. Something that would change everything. 2 days passed after that night in front of the door. The mysterious door in the Mirage that even the casino's own floor plans pretended didn't exist. And everything in our routine looked the same, but everything felt different. Our partnership had always been efficient, calculated, sharp, but now there was something else beneath the silence, something neither of us had truly named, but both of us felt like the quiet hum of electricity beneath the surface. Before, our silence was cold and professional. Now it was warm and alive. Now it meant something. That morning, at 6:47 a.m., we walked into the precinct together. Not side by side, but closer than before. Not close enough to touch, but close enough to feel. Something invisible had shifted, and everyone sensed it without understanding why. I caught Lopez trying to read us. He squinted, puzzled, trying to categorize it. Then gave up. No label fit. Captain Rhodes called us into his office, dropped a file onto the desk, and said, "Someone knows." He waited. We both watched. The photos were surveillance stills. Of us. At the Mirage. Not in our undercover attire. Not pretending to be a couple. These images were from that last night, when we stood near the private corridor as ourselves, Jordan and Riley. Partners. Friends. Something else. Talking. Watching the door. Someone had photographed us. Someone had sent these pictures to Rhodes anonymously with one brief note. "They're getting close." Rhodes looked at us. He wasn't angry. He was concerned. Not that our cover had been blown, but because someone had been watching us. Closely. For days. "I need to know," Rhodes said, eyes narrowing. "Are you working this case, or is this case working you?" Before I could speak, Jordan answered, voice steady. "We're working it. Carefully. And we are close." Something flickered in Rhodes's eyes. Approval, concern, calculation. He studied Jordan, then turned to me. "I don't care how close you get," he said. "But don't lose objectivity." He glanced between us longer than necessary. "And don't lose each other." It wasn't a warning. It was something closer to hope. When we walked out of his office, Jordan didn't look at me. She just walked. Fast. Controlled. Determined. I followed her down the hallway, past the break room, past the interview rooms. Then suddenly she stopped. Not just stopped. She froze. In front of the glass case that displayed archived cold case files. Cases solved, cases unsolved, cases that had never fully closed. Case number #3476, NV. Missing person. Michael Wells. I turned. Her eyes were on the case. But not on the label. On the photo, a clean-cut teenager with a mischievous smile, half-tucked shirt, bright, curious eyes. Eyes like hers. She didn't blink. Not even once. After a long moment, she said quietly, "They treated him like a file, not like a person." She wasn't crying, but her voice felt like rain about to start. And something inside me reacted, not as a detective, but as someone watching another break silently. Slowly, quietly, without ceremony, I stepped closer. Not touching, just near. "Jordan." She didn't look at me. I thought I could handle seeing it. I didn't answer. "He was 19, she whispered. "And for 7 years, that file has been behind glass. Untouched." She finally turned to me slowly, and I swear her eyes were not just sad. They were tired of being brave. He wasn't a case. He was my brother. And that was when I broke my own rule. I reached out, slow, deliberate, and my hand touched her arm. Not professionally, not casually, but gently, carefully. Like the first time you touch something delicate that might shatter if you aren't soft enough. Her breath caught, not hard, not sharply, softly. Like something inside her had stopped running. She looked down at my hand. Her voice was barely a breath. "Riley." It wasn't a warning. It wasn't discomfort. It was something closer to permission. Acknowledgement. She didn't pull away. She didn't lean closer. She just stayed there, letting my hand rest lightly on her arm, quiet, steady, real. It lasted only a moment, but it was the most honest moment we'd ever shared. After that, Something between us became unspoken but understood. We stopped walking with space between us. We stopped sitting at opposite sides of desks. In cars, during stakeouts, she didn't angle her seat away from me anymore. She angled it slightly toward me. Not enough for anyone to notice, but enough for me to feel. That night, we followed our first real lead. Anonymous tip, handwritten, no digital trace. Address, 1186 Bright Arrow Road. No sender name. No message. Just 2 words. Asked the bartender. Bright Arrow Road wasn't near casinos. It was on the outskirts, a rundown part of Vegas where tourists never went, where old money went to die, where forgotten stories lingered beneath dust and cigarette smoke. The bar looked closed. It wasn't. The sign flickered weakly, blue cinder. Inside, only 4 people. 3 drunk. 1 watching. The bartender. Middle-aged. Quiet eyes. Hard jaw. A face that had seen things people didn't talk about. Jordan approached slowly, not like a cop. Like a person. We're not here to arrest you, she said. We're here because someone disappeared 7 years ago. The bartender said nothing. Just watched her. She continued. His name was Michael Wells. Silence. But not empty. Loaded. The man's expression didn't change, but his breathing did. Jordan didn't flinch. You've seen him. The bartender didn't deny it. Didn't confirm it. Just stared at her for a long time before finally saying, "Come back tomorrow night." No badges. Then he walked away. I watched Jordan. Her face didn't move, but her pulse did. I could see it in the hollow of her throat. Steady. Deep. Alive. We walked out into the night, into the heat that clung to the pavement like smoke. She didn't speak. I didn't rush her. After a long silence, she finally said, "He knows something." Yes. Another silence. Then quietly, vulnerably, "I don't know what scares me more, Riley. That he knows what happened to my brother, or that he might tell me." She wasn't looking at me, but I was looking at her. And in that moment, I didn't see the woman who flirted with danger or who used humor to disarm suspects. I saw the woman who had spent 7 years trying to be strong. 7 years searching for answers she wasn't sure she wanted. 7 years alone. So I did something I had never done before. I reached for her hand. Not accidentally. Not briefly. Fully. Intentionally. I held it. Not tightly. Not loosely. Just held it. And this time, she didn't just let it happen. She held mine back. Not a lot. Not dramatically. Just enough. Enough to say, I feel it too. Enough to say, this is real. Enough to say, I trust you. And for the very first time, it felt like the beginning of something neither of us had words for yet. The desert was different that night. Not hotter, not colder, just heavier, like the air itself knew that something was coming, like the sky was holding its breath, waiting for something to break. We arrived at the Blue Cinder Bar just before midnight. No badges, no weapons, no uniforms, no shield of authority to hide behind. Just us, Jordan and I, 2 people walking into a place that remembered things the world had forgotten. The bartender saw us the moment we entered. He didn't wave, didn't nod, didn't motion for us to sit. He didn't need to. He knew we would come back. He knew we wouldn't come just out of curiosity. He knew we were searching for something heavier than a missing person. We sat at the far end, in front of a dusty window where neon light flickered through from the old motel next door. The bartender didn't come right away. He took his time, polishing a glass, nodding to a regular, staring at us like he was studying not what we asked, but how badly we needed to know. When he finally approached, he didn't look at me. He looked at Jordan. And I saw it, recognition. Not of her face. Of her pain. He didn't ask what we wanted to drink. He simply said, "Your brother came here 3 times before he vanished." Jordan didn't flinch. Didn't blink. But something inside her shifted, like her bones remembered. "Who did he meet?" she asked, voice steady, but too steady. The bartender leaned closer, elbows on the worn wooden counter, his expression tight, hesitant. "He wasn't meeting someone," he said quietly. "He was watching someone." Silence hit the room like a drop in pressure. I felt Jordan's breath catch beside me. barely audible, but enough to make the air feel warmer. Watching who? I asked when she couldn't speak. The bartender didn't look at me. A woman, he said slowly. Well-dressed. Influential. Untouchable. Rumors said she ran money through the mirage. Rumors said she ran people. A crime boss, I suggested. The bartender shook his head. Not a boss, he said with unsettling certainty. A queen. Jordan's pulse was visible in her neck now, slow, deep, purposeful. She swallowed carefully, but her voice, God, her voice, felt different when she spoke. Did she have a name? The bartender waited, looked at her, and then he said, Blackwood. The name cut through the silence like glass. And though I had heard it 100 times, Blackwood Real Estate Holdings, Blackwood Private Gaming, Blackwood Legal Arbitration, this time it felt different. Not corporate, not institutional. Something darker, something older, something dangerous. The bartender continued. Your brother wasn't supposed to be involved, but he saw something. Something he never should have seen. And then one night he followed her. Into the casino. He walked through doors he wasn't meant to walk through. He paused, looked directly at Jordan. And he didn't walk back out. Jordan's hands were still. Too still. She didn't move, didn't breathe deeply, didn't cry, didn't panic. But her silence was a numbness. It was something more dangerous. It was grief. Controlled grief. Contained grief. The kind that builds pressure underneath. The kind that explodes when finally released. The bartender didn't comfort her. He didn't pity her. He simply said, he wasn't running. He wasn't stupid. He was trying to help someone. Who? I asked. A girl, he said. And this time, something in his voice softened. Not sympathy. Memory. She wore a red bracelet. Jordan inhaled sharply, just once, but it told me everything. She remembered. She remembered that bracelet. Before I could speak, the bartender stood, walked away, left us with nothing but silence and truth that felt too heavy to hold. We walked out of the bar slowly, not speaking. The heat had settled over the street, thick, still, unforgiving. She walked ahead. I followed. Halfway to the car, she stopped. Not abruptly. Quietly. Like her body realized before her mind that she could not keep walking. She didn't turn around. Her voice, when it came, was soft. Not broken. Not weak. Just tired. He didn't disappear because he got involved, she whispered. He disappeared because he tried to help someone. I didn't speak. He wasn't reckless. He wasn't lost. Her breathing grew steadier, deeper. Not calmer, just clearer. He was protecting someone. I stepped closer. No hesitation. No calculation. And for the first time, she didn't hide from it. Didn't step back. Didn't pretend she was fine. She stood completely still. Then, slowly, she turned to face me. The streetlights were dim, but enough to show everything. Her eyes shining not with tears, but with something more painful. Something like relief and agony fused together. All this time, she whispered, I thought I needed closure. But I didn't. I just needed to know who he really was when it happened. Her voice was different now, unarmored. Everyone thinks tragedy defines people, she continued softly. But sometimes it reveals who they truly were. I didn't say I understood. I didn't try to comfort her. I didn't touch her yet. I just stood there, close, present, willing. And for a long moment, she looked at me like she had been waiting years to be seen like this. Slowly, carefully, her hand lifted, not to reach for me, but to touch her own wrist, where she traced the faint shape of something long gone. He used to wear a bracelet, she whispered. Before she did. Silence again. But this silence was not empty or cold or formal. It was soft, full. Something had changed, and we both felt it. The neon reflected across her face, casting warm shadows across her cheekbones, and I saw it. How her armor had cracked just enough to let light in. Not trust. Not romance. Not yet. But something just as terrifying. Openness. She didn't step away. She stepped closer. Not enough to touch, but enough to change everything. I don't know how to do this, she admitted quietly. I didn't ask what this was. We both knew. Neither do I whispered back. She looked at me then, not just with her eyes, but with her guard lowered, her pulse visible, her breathing calm. Not hiding. And for the very first time in years, neither was I. And even though no kiss happened that night, God, it almost did, it didn't matter. Because something far more dangerous happened instead. We stopped running. Night stakeouts always had a rhythm to them. The hum of the engine. The fizzing glow of neon signs in the distance. The crackle of the radio that wasn't really saying anything. But that night, nothing had rhythm. Nothing settled. Nothing felt like it usually did. The sky above Las Vegas didn't look like a sky. It looked like something holding its breath. Even the city felt like it was waiting. That was the night when silence became something else. Not a gap between words, not the professional stillness of observation, not the focused quiet of a case coming together.
No.
That night, silence was intimacy. That night, silence was confession. That night, silence was the thing that finally broke. We were sitting in the unmarked cruiser, parked across from a private gated property on the outskirts of Vegas, a location connected to the private room at the Mirage, and possibly to Blackwood herself. According to the informant, vehicles come and go after midnight. But that wasn't what kept me looking out the windshield. That wasn't what kept my pulse quiet, but intense. What kept me still was the fact that she had leaned back in her seat, head tilted slightly toward the window, eyes closed, not asleep, not resting, just breathing. The kind of breathing someone only does when they finally stop pretending they're fine. For almost an hour, we didn't speak. I didn't push. She didn't hide. She sat there, quiet, thoughtful, vulnerable in a way she didn't try to mask. And I watched her, not like her partner, not like a detective evaluating body language, but like someone realizing that silence was more intimate than touch. Finally, she spoke. Eyes still closed. Riley, her voice wasn't unsteady. It wasn't weak. It was different. Unarmored. The day they classified Michael's case as inactive, she said softly, everyone told me to move on. I didn't interrupt. I didn't even breathe too loudly. They said, closure matters more than answers, Jordan. As if closure was something you just decide. She exhaled, long, slow. But really the truth is, I was terrified of answers. I turned my head slowly, watching the subtle tension around her eyes, the tightness in her jaw she didn't realize she still held, the part of her that was still bracing for pain. Because answers mean it really happened, she whispered. And if it happened, I can't change it. The softness of that hurt more than any tears would have. She didn't cry. She wasn't the crying type. She was the kind of person who felt deeply, but quietly. The kind that carried things not because she wanted to, but because she didn't know how to set them down. I didn't touch her. But I wanted to. She continued after a moment, her voice warm but fragile, like something that had gone unused for too long. When I joined the force, everyone thought I was chasing justice. But I wasn't. Her breathing changed, slow, steady, real. No hiding. I was chasing someone who wouldn't run from the hard question. She opened her eyes, turned to face me, not slowly, not dramatically, naturally, like she had known I was looking and like she wanted to be looked at. And then, she said, voice calm, eyes steady, breath barely a whisper. I met you. It didn't feel like surprise. It didn't feel like revelation. It felt like honesty. Pure, unfiltered honesty, finally spoken out loud. There was no space between us. We had been in a car together hundreds of times. But never like this. Never with her looking at me like she wasn't afraid anymore. Never with me looking at her like I didn't want to run anymore. When I talk, she said slowly, you actually listen. Not to respond. Not to fix. You listen, like you're holding something fragile and you don't want to drop it. My chest tightened. My pulse deepened. Something warm moved through me. Not like fear, not like caution. Like recognition. Then I did something I never do. I spoke without thinking about how it would sound. I listen, I said softly, steadily. Because when you finally look away from the world long enough to let someone see you, really see you, there's nothing more honest than that. Her gaze didn't break. Her breathing didn't shift. She didn't say anything, but everything in her expression changed. Something opened. Something softened. Not romantic. Not yet. Something more dangerous. Safe. Safe was something neither of us felt often. For her, maybe not in 7 years. For me, maybe not ever. She let her head rest against the seat, still facing me. And when she spoke next, her voice was a whisper, but not because it was weak. Because it was honest. "You scare me," she whispered. I didn't move. Why? Because I don't know how to not care about you anymore. Silence. Again. But not empty. Overflowing. I didn't think before I moved. I didn't hesitate. I just turned my body slightly toward her, slow, cautious, like approaching something sacred. And this time, she didn't shift away. She turned too. No rush. No panic. No pretending. We were no longer sitting side by side. We were facing each other. And now, there was no emotional distance left. No shield. No badge. No armor. Her voice broke the quiet, not trembling, but softer. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted again, but differently than before. Not like confession. Like invitation. "I don't either," I said. And it was true. But it felt like the first thing that ever made sense. She held my gaze a long time. Then, very, very slowly, she lifted her hand. Not reaching toward me yet. Just lifting it. Like she was letting herself see if I would back away. I didn't. So she continued. Her hand moved closer. Not to touch my face. Not to pull me in. Just to rest, gently, reverently, against my wrist. Soft. Warm. Steady. And that one touch felt like more intimacy than any kiss could have been. Because it wasn't impulsive or dramatic. It was a choice. She kept her hand there. And I let her. I didn't just let her. I turned my wrist and let her feel my pulse. Steady. Unafraid. Real. She looked at me. Not at my mouth. Not at my body. At me. Like she was memorizing something. Not rushing toward what would happen next, but acknowledging that it could. Finally, she spoke. 5 quiet words. Words that didn't ask. Words that acknowledged. Something is happening to us. My voice was a breath when it came. Yes. She didn't move her hand away. She didn't lean closer. But she didn't pull back either. Tomorrow, she whispered, we still have to be detectives. Yes. But tonight, she breathed, softer, warmer. I don't want to pretend. And then, silence again. But this time, silence was permission. No kiss yet. No rush. But something deeper. Something even more intimate. For the first time, we allowed desire to exist. Not acted on, but felt. Together. And when I finally spoke, it was not a confession. Not a question. Just the truth. I don't want to pretend anymore either. And that was how it began. Not with a kiss, but with something far more dangerous. Readiness. The wind moved differently that night. Not hard, not soft, just heavy, like the desert had been waiting centuries for something to break open in this city of illusions, where people gambled with money, with memory, with truth, with love. Outside the old gated property, the air tasted like rust and electricity, as though something buried deep was about to resurface. We were back in the unmarked cruiser, only this time we weren't just watching, we were waiting. The note had been delivered earlier that day, anonymous, handwritten, slipped under the door of our precinct conference room. Same 2 words. Ask again. Same time. Same place. No badges. No uniforms. No backup. Midnight. Always midnight. This isn't procedural, I had told Rhodes. No, he'd said. This is personal. When we arrived, Jordan was quiet. Not tense. Not nervous. Just thoughtful, like someone standing on the edge of a memory with one foot in the present. She sat with both hands loosely resting in her lap, turning something between her fingers. A thin band. Worn silver. Not a ring. A bracelet. Faded red thread woven through the center. The bracelet of the girl Michael had tried to help. I didn't ask where she got it. She didn't ask why I was watching her. She knew. She leaned back, exhaled deeply, slowly, controlled but unguarded, finally unguarded. And then she looked at me. Not as her detective partner. Not as her emotional safe place. Not as someone she had learned to trust. She looked at me like she had made a choice.
She didn't speak.
But she didn't have to. Something had changed. Something had shifted. Something had decided. And then, before she could say anything, the headlights appeared. A black sedan turned slowly into the gravel driveway of the gated property. No license plate. No headlights after parking. And suddenly, too suddenly, the car door opened and a man stepped out. Middle-aged, sharply dressed in a suit that didn't match this dusty roadside property. He wasn't associated with the casino staff. He wasn't just involved. He was high-level. He walked toward the gate.
Stopped.
Looked directly at our car. He knew. He didn't look surprised to see us. He looked annoyed. Controlled. Dangerous. Jordan stiffened in her seat. It wasn't fear. It was recognition.
He didn't speak.
He didn't approach. He didn't threaten. He only took something from his pocket, a phone, and held it up. He pressed play. Audio crackled through the night air. A voice.
Young. Male.
Nervous. My name is Michael Wells. It's Friday night. If something happens to me, it won't be an accident. Jordan stopped breathing. He kept playing it. Michael's voice.
Honest. Scared. Brave.
I don't know if I can help her, but I have to try. People like her don't get rescued. They get erased. A door slammed in the recording. Footsteps. Then silence. Then, a woman's voice.
Soft. Calm.
Chilling. He shouldn't have come here. Then nothing. No scream. No struggle. Just silence. Permanent silence. The man stopped the recording. The night air felt colder, tighter, unnatural. He didn't look at me. He looked at Jordan. Your brother wasn't chasing criminals, he said. He was challenging an empire. Then he turned and walked away, leaving us with the truth, raw, brutal, unfinished. Jordan's hands were shaking now. Not violently, just slightly. The kind of shaking that comes when you've held your breath for 7 years and suddenly remember how to breathe. She wasn't crying, but something in her had broken, not shattered, broken open. And I couldn't stay in my seat anymore. I unbuckled my belt and moved around the console, not thinking, not analyzing, not asking permission. Just moving. Moving toward her. She didn't look up. But she didn't look away. Her breathing was shallow, controlled, trembling. Not with panic, but with something far more vulnerable. She was trying to keep years of grief contained inside a perfect, disciplined posture. She was trying not to fall apart. And I could see exactly when she realized she didn't have to. Her breath faltered. Her eyes lifted. And then, slowly, she let the tears sit in her eyes, not falling, just existing. Visible. Real. I couldn't save him, she whispered. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't broken. It was honest. And something inside me reacted so strongly I forgot how to speak. So I didn't. I reached. Not cautiously. Not hesitantly, but gently, intentionally. I cupped her face in my hands, warm skin against my palms, her pulse soft beneath my fingertips, the first real touch not for comfort, not for disguise, but because it felt like truth. Her eyes widened, not because she was startled, but because she let herself be seen. Without armor. Completely. Her breath hitched, not because she was afraid, but because she was ready. And then she closed that last few inches of space between us. No hesitation. No doubt. No hiding. Her forehead rested against mine, just that for a moment. Breath against breath, heartbeat against heartbeat. Everything slow and real and dangerously quiet. He tried to protect someone, she whispered, voice trembling. And I never let myself feel proud of him. Only angry. Only hurt. You don't have to be angry anymore. I whispered, not to fix, not to save, just to say. You just have to let it be real. Her breathing deepened. Her hands lifted, not uncertain, not timid. She slid them slowly to my waist, steady, firm, grounding me to the moment. And then, like sunrise breaking through after days of rain, her eyes lifted to mine. Not fearful, not guarded, not questioning.
Certain. Soft.
And then she kissed me. No rush. No collision. Not a stolen, desperate kiss. A real one. The kind you don't chase but arrive at. The kind that says, I trust you with the parts of me that hurt. Her lips were soft but steady, her hands holding my face like she had been waiting to do this. Not for days, but for years. And I kissed her back, not urgently, not hungrily, but slowly, deeply, letting time stretch and settle around that moment like the city itself had stopped to witness it. It wasn't about desire. It was about recognition. It was about choice. When she finally pulled back, she didn't step away. She kept her hands on my face, our foreheads resting against each other, breathing the same air. And then, very softly, very honestly, she said the words aloud. I don't want to run from this anymore. Outside, Vegas flashed and glittered like always. But this moment, it didn't belong to Vegas, or to the case, or to grief. It belonged to us. And for the first time, I didn't want to run from it either. Las Vegas didn't blink that night. It watched. It didn't shimmer with its usual neon haze or pretend to hide behind its electric glamour. It watched from the dark corners of forgotten streets, from abandoned warehouses where luck didn't shine, from places where people weren't lost but buried. That night, Vegas held its breath because something was shifting. And the city knew. We spent hours analyzing the audio recording of Michael's final message, but something about it felt incomplete. His words held urgency, but not resignation. It didn't sound like a farewell. It sounded like a warning. A warning he expected someone to find. Someone like her. Jordan listened to it over and over again, not with grief, but with concentration, like she was trying to hear something behind the words, something he didn't say. At 2:14 a.m., she turned to me in the silent operations room, only one lamp illuminating stacks of files and photos. He left something behind, she whispered. Not just the audio. She scrubbed the file frame by frame, watching the milliseconds before the woman's voice said, he shouldn't have come here. Then she froze the image. A flicker, barely perceptible. Too fast for eyes, just long enough for a camera. A wrist. A red thread bracelet. The same one Jordan had been turning in her fingers earlier that night. The girl he tried to protect. The girl he followed. The girl who knew something. And maybe the girl who never got out. But there was something else. A background noise. Faint, rhythmic, hollow. Not casino music. Not chips. Not machines. Something metallic. Something regular.
Clink. Clink. Clink.
Jordan went still. Absolutely still. Then she exhaled, slow and controlled. That's not casino audio, she whispered. That's scaffolding. I frowned. Construction? She shook her head. Not new construction.
Old.
Hollow echoes. That's not Vegas strip real estate. That's outside city limits. She knew this sound. Not from a file. From memory. Mining tunnels, she whispered. Old ones. The kind carved beneath the ground years before Vegas became Vegas. The kind forgotten. The kind ignored. The kind no one checks. Especially when they're used for things no one should see. She looked at me then, not with fear.
With certainty.
He's not gone. And in that moment, I believed her. Because this time, she wasn't speaking as a detective. She was speaking as a sister. And I had never seen someone more certain of anything. We drove out past the edges of Vegas, past the strip, past the glow, past the illusion, until neon was replaced by darkness, until pavement faded into dirt, until signal disappeared from our phones and stars replaced the casinos. It was 3:46 a.m. when we reached the old mining fields, abandoned, fenced, forgotten by maps but not by secrets. Jordan led.
She didn't rush.
She knew. Past rusted gates. Past padlocks that were old but recently handled. Past warning signs that didn't feel like warnings, but like invitations to stay away. The hatch wasn't visible until we were almost standing on it. Metal. Flat. Heavy. Not old mining equipment.
New.
Reinforced. Used. Someone had been here recently. Someone had been keeping something here. Or someone. The lock had been cut before, not by us. Bolt cutters.
Fresh.
The hatch groaned when we pulled it open, the stale air beneath smelling not like abandonment, but like breath. The kind that had been waiting. The air was colder down there. Too cold for Nevada. Concrete corridors. Dim bulbs. Chains on the walls. This wasn't a historical site.
It was a holding place.
A prison. And suddenly my pulse felt too loud in my throat. You okay? I whispered. But I didn't need to say it. She wasn't afraid. She was something else entirely. Focused.
Steady.
Reckless only in her certainty. I can't explain it, she whispered. But he's near. I don't know how, but I feel it. We moved deeper. We heard something.
Faint.
Not footsteps. Not voices. Something rhythmic.
Soft.
Repeating.
Clink. Clink. Clink.
My breath caught. Jordan froze. Not in fear. In recognition. Michael, she whispered. And then we saw him. Or what was left of him. Tucked against a corner of a narrow concrete cell, back against the wall, wrists cuffed, weak but not unconscious, not lifeless, not gone. His hair was longer. His face thinner. But those eyes, the same deep gold brown as hers, lifted when he heard her breath. And for the first time in 7 years, she said his name like it had never left her tongue. Michael. It wasn't a question. It was a prayer. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. His breathing hitched. His eyes widened slowly. Then tears formed. Not wild. Not broken. Just quiet, as though they had been waiting. Jordan. Not disbelief. Not shock. Recognition. She didn't run. She didn't scream. She didn't fall. She walked.
Slowly.
Like she was afraid to touch something sacred. And I swear, the closer she got, the warmer the room felt. When she finally reached him, her hands trembled as she touched his face, not to check, not to confirm, just to feel. Skin against skin.
Real.
Alive. His hand lifted weakly. And when their fingers touched, time stopped. No city. No case. No badge. Just them. Finally. And I, standing back, felt something I hadn't expected. Something warm.
Fierce.
Protective. I had never seen something more vulnerable or more powerful in my life. The siblings didn't speak. They didn't need to. Some reunions are too big for words. Some truths too deep for language. I let them have it, but only for a moment, because reality was walking back toward us.
Boots.
Echoes. More than one. And not surprised. They knew we were here. They were already coming. 3 figures. Armed. Not panicked. Not sloppy. Professional. Watching. Tracking. Waiting for us to find him. Because they never planned to let us leave. Jordan wasn't afraid. I was. But hers wasn't recklessness. It was clarity. She turned to me, not frantic, not shaken, but ready. They were never trying to hide him, she whispered. They were waiting for someone to come find him. Why? Her answer was quiet. Brutal. Because finding him makes you a witness. That was when I heard it. Trucks. Engines. More footsteps. This wasn't intimidation. It was containment. Riley, her voice was firm, urgent, but steady. We don't run. We take him. And we get out.
Boots.
Closer. Voices. Armed men entering from both ends of the tunnel. No exit. No escape. Unless we made one. She turned to me, calm in the chaos. The kind of calm that made my pulse slow down too. This isn't just my case anymore. She looked directly into my eyes. Into me. This is ours. And that was when I realized that what was between us wasn't just connection. Or trust. Or attraction. It was alliance. It was choice. It was love, built not out of safety but in danger. Built not out of comfort, but in risk. Built not out of perfection but in survival. We heard them. They were close enough to shoot. Close enough to kill. Close enough to ruin everything. And then, hand on my arm, she whispered, "No matter what happens next, don't leave me." And I didn't hesitate. I answered, not with panic, not with fear, but with certainty. I won't. They turned. Flashlights. Weapons. Commands shouted. I pulled Michael to his feet. Jordan moved beside me. Not behind. Beside. Ready. Together. And for the first time in this entire investigation, we stopped searching. And we started fighting. The tunnel was no longer a place beneath the city. It was a heartbeat, a pulse of danger echoing against concrete walls, reverberating through each breath we took. The moment we realized we were not alone, that the people who had held Michael were not just guarding him but waiting, something in the air shifted, thickened, sharpened with a kind of clarity that no training could teach. This wasn't just pursuit. It was containment. They hadn't hidden Michael from the world. They had hidden the world from him. Jordan's hand hadn't left my arm since the first flashlight beam crawled along the corridor wall, stopping inches from our shadows, as though deciding whether to expose or devour us. She didn't look at me when she whispered, "We move on my signal," but she didn't need to. I felt her pulse through her fingertips. Even when she was calm, it beat like fire. We pulled Michael to his feet, his body weak, but his mind painfully aware. Too aware. He tried to speak, tried to tell her something, but Jordan shook her head, and for a moment, she was not a detective, not a sister, but a force. "No goodbyes," she told him quietly. "Only getting out." Voices. Radio crackles. Commands in low tones. Not rushed. Not surprised. They expected this. They didn't want to stop us now. They wanted to stop us when we knew just enough to be dangerous, but not enough to be believed. Jordan moved first. I followed, Michael between us, barely able to stand. We reached a split in the tunnels, left, dark, unlit, unstable. Right, faint light, signs of movement. Jordan didn't hesitate. "Left," she said. "They won't risk the unstable ground." But the ground wasn't just unstable. It was carved differently. Rougher, older. It wasn't made to hold prisoners. It was made to hide secrets. We moved fast, the air colder now, smelling of iron and damp stone. And then footsteps. Behind us. Closer. Not running. Not chasing. Walking. Hunter's pace. I pushed Michael forward, adrenaline flooding my chest, but his legs buckled, and I caught him before he hit the ground. He was trembling, breath shallow. "I can't. You can," Jordan said, kneeling beside him in one fluid motion, her voice low, fierce, soft all at once. "You already survived what they didn't want you to. You walk." He looked at her then. Not at us. At her. And in that brief glance, I understood something I hadn't before. He never stopped believing she would come. Even when the world said she wouldn't. Even when everyone stopped looking. Even when she stopped believing herself. He never did. We kept moving. Voices faded behind us, but they weren't gone. They weren't chasing. They were waiting. Waiting for us to realize that escape wasn't outside. It was deeper in. The deeper we went, the colder it became, and the tunnel narrowed, stone giving way to reinforced walls. Someone had modified this place. Someone had turned it from a mining path into something else, a transport route, a supply artery, a place where people entered and didn't ask where it led. "This wasn't just a prison," I whispered. "It was a system." Jordan nodded, jaw tight, mind racing. "Someone is moving people through here." "Blackwood," I said. It wasn't a question. It wasn't an accusation. It was truth. We reached a rusted staircase that led up to a hatch. Faint light seeped through, dusty, muted, the way morning light looks through an abandoned warehouse. She went first. I helped Michael. The hatch groaned as it opened, air hitting us, not fresh, not free, but open. Space. Possibility. We emerged into a warehouse, Wide, tall, hollow, the kind that used to hold shipments, now holding ghosts. Sunlight pushed its way through shattered windows high above, catching in dust that fell like hesitant snow. For a moment, just a moment, we had space to breathe. Michael sank to the ground, exhausted but awake.
Alive.
Present. Jordan knelt beside him, touching his shoulder, checking for injuries. I scanned the warehouse. Empty. But not abandoned. No clutter. No debris. No signs of disuse. It felt swept.
Prepared.
Waiting. They're not blocking us, I said quietly. They're hurting us. Jordan looked at me. And she knew. She stood. Went to the window. Looked out. Desert. Empty. Flat. No roads. No sound. No backup. No help. No signal. We weren't just lost. We were outside the map. So what now? I asked. No panic. No fear. Just truth. She turned to me, and her eyes, God, her eyes, were not defeated. They were alive. Now, she said quietly, we decide what we're running toward. There, finally, was the shift. It had never been about running away from danger. It had always been about running toward truth. And now, that truth was alive, bruised, trembling, but breathing beside her. She looked at Michael, then at me. They wanted us scared, she whispered. They wanted us desperate. She stepped closer. Not to comfort, to anchor. But we are not desperate. Her hand touched mine, fast, intentional, firm. Not like before, not like a question, like an answer, like we had already decided. The sunlight hit her hair through the broken warehouse window, and I swear for a moment, just a moment, it didn't feel like we were in danger. It felt like we were exactly where we were meant to be. Not safe, but awake.
A sound.
Not footsteps. A click. Not a weapon. A camera. Someone was watching. We didn't see them. We only heard the shudder. Too close. Too real. And suddenly the warehouse felt smaller. The air thicker. The moment ending. But I didn't let go of her hand. And she didn't let go of mine. It doesn't matter, she said, her voice calm. Steady. Alive. They can watch. They can chase. But they don't get to control the story anymore. She looked at Michael. We know the truth now. Then she looked at me. And we're not alone anymore. And even though we heard engines outside, even though we saw lights approaching, even though danger was no longer silent, I felt something new. Not fear. Not panic. Something stronger. Preparedness. Her fingers tightened in mine. Not gently, not shakily.
Steady.
Grounding.
Real.
We weren't just fighting for justice. We weren't just fighting for survival. We were fighting for someone. And maybe, finally, also for each other. The silence in the warehouse didn't last. It was never meant to. It wasn't a place for rest. It was a place for transition. A place built for movement, not safety. A place where people paused but never stayed. Jordan and I both felt it before we heard it. That shift in the air, subtle but unmistakable, like the way desert wind changes seconds before a storm arrives. Michael was sitting against the wall, his breathing shallow but steady, but his eyes were wide, not with fear, but awareness. They're coming, he whispered, and he wasn't guessing. He was remembering. And then we heard it too. Engines.
2.
Maybe 3. Not distant. Approaching.
Controlled speed.
Not racing in, the kind that knew exactly where to go. Jordan stood quickly, scanning the warehouse with sharp eyes, calculating entrances, shadows, angles. She wasn't panicked. She was tactical. Her hand went to her holster, not because she had a weapon. We left everything at the tunnel entrance, but because that movement was instinct. We need to move, she said.
Now.
Where? I asked. She didn't point. She looked up. I blinked. You're serious? They'll enter at ground level, she said, already moving toward the scaffolding along the far wall, old wooden beams leading up to a rusted catwalk. So we don't. She moved quickly, pulling Michael up with unexpected strength, her adrenaline making her stronger, fiercer, focus like I'd never seen before. I climbed after them, my hands gripping cold metal, the air thick with dust and tension. The warehouse door creaked open below.
Boots.
Many. Not rushed. Not searching. They knew exactly where we were. But we were already above, hidden in the maze of beams and shadows that time had abandoned. We crouched low, breath shallow, hearts loud. I couldn't see their faces clearly, but I saw enough. They weren't local law enforcement. Too organized. Too precise. They moved like military. Efficient. Silent. Unhurried. And one of them, one in a dark coat, not tactical gear, was looking up. Watching the beams. Watching us. Not surprised. Just waiting. Jordan saw him too. And for the first time, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Not fear. Not panic. Recognition. He knew her. Somehow he knew her. They swept the warehouse. They didn't speak. The man in the coat didn't give orders. He didn't need to. He knew how this would go. When he finally did speak, it was only 5 words.
Calm.
Controlled. Like he had all the time in the world. You have something that's mine. Jordan stiffened beside me. Not because of the words. Because of the voice. I watched her. Her muscles tightened. But this wasn't battle readiness. This was personal. Too personal. He stepped closer. Dust caught in the light from the broken windows behind him, framing him in faded gold. Middle-aged. Sharp eyes. Calm posture. No visible weapons. But he was more dangerous than anyone we'd seen.
Jordan, he said softly.
Not shouting. Not searching. Speaking.
To her.
You're not supposed to be here. The world stopped breathing. He knew her name. Before she could react, Michael struggled to stand. And for the first time, I heard his voice full of fear. Not for himself, but for her.
No.
Jordan, don't talk to him. It wasn't just fear. It was memory. He knew that voice too. The man looked up at us, not angry. Almost regretful. Your brother tried to protect something that wasn't his to protect, he said, softly, like he was explaining this for our benefit. Now you've made the same mistake. My pulse was hammering now. Jordan didn't move. Didn't blink. Didn't answer. Just stared at him. Silent. And then, in the quietest, calmest voice I'd ever heard her use, she whispered, You knew. He didn't nod. He didn't deny it. They don't belong in this, he said. Not your brother. Then his eyes lifted. Met mine. Not you. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was the kind of silence where every possible outcome hangs in the balance, waiting for someone, anyone, to choose. Jordan didn't wait. She stood abruptly, exposed, seen, no longer hiding in the shadows. You don't get to decide that, she said. Not angry. Not shouting. Just certain. He watched her.
Calm.
Patient. Then he looked at me again. You have 10 seconds, he said softly, before my men take him back. He looked at Michael. Hurt but alive. Only this time, he added quietly, he won't be kept here. Jordan's voice didn't tremble. He's not going anywhere. His expression didn't shift. But something in his eyes did. That depends entirely, he said, on how far you're willing to go. He gave her one last look. One that said something I couldn't hear. Something only she understood. Then he turned. Walked out. No gunfire. No order to shoot. Just a warning. Just a promise. Just a choice. When he and his men were gone, the air felt thin, shaky, like the building itself had heard too much truth and didn't know how to hold it. Michael sat back down slowly, breathing steadily, but his hands trembling harder than before. Jordan didn't look at him. She didn't look at me. She stared at the door where the man had gone, like her past had just walked back into her present. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, controlled, but something in it had cracked. He knew my name, she said. It wasn't a question, but Michael answered anyway. He always did. She turned to him sharply. He didn't look away. He's not just part of it, Michael whispered. He's running it. The world shifted. Everything made sense and nothing did. Jordan just stared, like she had been holding something back for years, and now she couldn't anymore. I stepped beside her. Not in front of her, not shielding her, just beside her, like gravity had pulled us into place. Her breathing wasn't steady now. Her walls weren't up. Her pulse was visible and real. Who was he? I asked softly. Jordan didn't answer, but Michael did.
Quietly. Brokenly.
He's not just someone from the case, he whispered. He's someone from her life. Jordan closed her eyes. And when she opened them again, it wasn't anger I saw. It was hurt.
Deep. Old.
And something inside me reacted so strongly. I stepped closer without even thinking, my hand reaching, hovering, touching her wrist slowly, gently like before, but this time, she didn't hold still. She leaned into it. Her pulse was fast but steady beneath my fingers, her breath quiet but controlled. And for a moment, just one moment, she let me hold that hurt with her.
She didn't speak.
She didn't have to. In this warehouse full of danger and memory, with gunmen possibly watching, with betrayal cracking open old wounds, she let me hold her hand. Not for comfort. Not for reassurance. For courage. Whatever this is, I whispered. We don't do it alone. Her eyes lifted, met mine, and something in them changed. Fear didn't disappear. Pain didn't disappear. But something else grew, stronger than both. Resolve. She stepped closer, not hiding, not pretending, not running. And she whispered, quiet, but certain. I'm not afraid of them. Then, even softer. I'm only afraid of losing what I finally found. And she didn't mean the case. And she didn't mean her brother. And she didn't mean safety. She meant this.
Us.
And even with danger rising, engines returning, footsteps outside, there was a moment where none of that mattered. Because for the first time, she wasn't running from fear. She was running toward love. And I was already there, waiting. The warehouse stopped feeling like shelter the moment the engines came back.
It wasn't the sound that terrified me, it was the rhythm.
Not rushed. Not frantic. Not panicked. Whoever was coming for us was not afraid of losing us. They believed they wouldn't. Jordan heard it too. I could tell by the way her shoulders tightened, not with fear, but with realization. They were done watching. They were moving in. We didn't have minutes. We didn't even have time to talk strategy. What we had was a choice. Jordan made it first. We move, she said sharply, already pulling Michael up. He was still weak, but his eyes had changed. He wasn't only being rescued anymore. He was witnessing something. He was understanding something. We crossed the warehouse toward the east exit, the one with warped metal doors half-sealed by rust and neglect. The kind no one would expect anyone to use. Unless they didn't need doors. Unless they had a way out that didn't belong to the building. The wind stung our faces as we emerged into the night. The desert felt darker here. Colder. Emptier. But not abandoned. The feeling crawled along my spine. We weren't alone. We ran along the hillside, the gravel loose beneath us, crunching painfully loud under our feet. The moon wasn't full, but enough to illuminate a faint dirt road, one that must have been used for years but left off records. The kind used to make people disappear. Jordan didn't wait. She guided Michael into the back seat of the car we'd hidden earlier, a barely functional vehicle we'd parked, expecting a quick extraction. Instead, it had become our lifeline. I climbed into the passenger seat, chest tight, pulse painfully steady. She didn't look at me, but her hands shook slightly when she gripped the wheel. They're tracking us, I said quietly. She didn't nod, didn't argue. I know, she breathed, turning the key. Headlights off. Engine roaring in the darkness. The car sped down the dirt road, bouncing over the uneven surface, blending into the trackerless black of the night. Michael coughed in the back, holding onto the seat, his voice strained but conscious. They're not trying to catch you, he said. They're trying to make you run. Why? I asked, voice tight. Because people running, he whispered, look guilty. And that was when it hit us. They weren't just chasing us. They were framing us. The car jolted again. I braced against the dashboard. Jordan's eyes stayed sharp, but her breathing wasn't calm anymore. It was practiced, focused, until something flashed ahead. Too fast, too close,
Headlights. White.
blinding, and then impact. The car slammed sideways as another vehicle rammed into us, hard and deliberate, trying not to kill us, but to stop us. Metal shrieked. The car spun. The desert ground blurred. And then, silence. We didn't crash. We stopped. Airbags didn't deploy. They didn't want us dead. They wanted us taken. Jordan was dazed for only a second. Then her eyes sharpened. I heard the door unlatch on her side. The sound of boots crunching toward us. Her voice was low, fierce, and directed at me. Riley, I'm here. Stay. Not a chance. A figure moved fast out of the dark. Tactical gear. No insignia. No light. Silent. Intentional. I moved without thinking. I shoved the door open, nearly colliding into him, throwing my shoulder forward. He recovered too fast, raising a weapon close range. Not a firearm. A tranquilizer. They didn't want us dead. They wanted us erased. I didn't think. I lunged. Pain ripped across my shoulder as I slammed into him, hard enough to knock the weapon to the ground. We hit the dirt, rolling into the brush, sharp rocks slicing into my palms as we fought. My vision blurred. It wasn't fear. It was instinct. More footsteps. More lights. Jordan's voice calling my name. Sharp, desperate, not controlled, not strategic, emotional. I turned, just as another man approached her blind side. Jordan down. She spun, but too late.
He swung.
She couldn't block him in time. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I just moved.
Fast. Hard.
I intercepted his strike, slamming into him first. The impact burned through my side, sharp, searing pain that folded me to one knee. I gasped, but stayed upright. He turned to strike again. Jordan was faster. Her fist collided with his jaw in a clean, trained hit that sent him crumpling into the dirt. She didn't look at him. She looked at me. Her breath caught. Color drained from her face. She didn't look at my attacker. She looked at my arm.
Blood. Dark.
Not lethal, but bad. Bad enough. Riley, she whispered. Not professionally. Not as a detective. As something else entirely. Something breakable. Something afraid. I swallowed hard, steadying myself with one hand against the dirt. I'm fine. But I wasn't. My arm was bleeding heavily. The adrenaline was too loud, too fast. My vision wavered. You're hurt, she breathed, kneeling in front of me, her hands trembling. Not from shock. From emotion. Something raw. Something uncloaked. Riley, I'm fine, I repeated. But her hands, God, her hands, cupped my face like she had forgotten the world, the danger, the men still closing in. It was the first time I saw pure fear in her eyes, not fear of dying or being caught, fear of losing me. Men moved toward Michael's side of the car. Jordan didn't move. She didn't look away from me. Her voice broke. You can't fall now.
Not now.
I won't, I whispered. As long as you're not running alone. She froze, like the words had landed somewhere deep. She looked at me like she wanted to speak and couldn't, like her ribs had become too tight to hold her breath. Then, somewhere behind us, tires screeched to a halt. Not the men. Someone else. A new vehicle. A horn.
Twice.
Lights did not turn on, but I recognized the signal. Unmarked. Someone watching. Someone waiting for the right moment. Someone not trying to catch us. Someone trying to help. Jordan looked at the vehicle, then at me, then back at the vehicle, and I watched the realization unfold in her eyes.
Hope.
We have to move. Now, she whispered, her voice clipped, still shaken, but back in motion. Can you run? I nodded, even though I wasn't sure.
She believed me anyway.
She helped pull me up, carefully, firmly, like I mattered more than the pain. And then I felt it. Her hand. Not on my wrist. Not on my arm. Her fingers slid down until they interlocked with mine, fully. Not briefly. Not tentatively. Steady. Claiming. Leading. Stay with me, she said. Not an order. A plea. And I didn't let go. We ran. With Michael ahead, toward the waiting vehicle. We didn't look back. Not because we weren't being chased, but because for the first time we were running toward something. Not away. We dove into the back of the vehicle.
The doors slammed.
The driver didn't speak. Didn't look back. Just drove.
Fast.
Leaving dust, lights, danger, and the past behind. And then, in the dark, as the pain throbbed and my pulse steadied, her hand found mine again. This time not to lead, not to protect, but simply to stay. And in that moment, with blood still drying on my arm, sirens fading, and truth closing in, I knew. We had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. We didn't just survive together. We had chosen each other. The vehicle cut through the desert like it knew the land by memory, headlights still off, engine low, moving with purpose through the darkened back roads as though it had traveled them before. Not tonight, not yesterday, but years ago. No one spoke. Not me, not Jordan, not Michael, not even the driver. A woman whose face we could barely see, except for her eyes in the rearview mirror. Her gaze flicked toward us periodically, not with curiosity, not with suspicion, but with recognition. She had been waiting. When the road finally ended, we weren't in Las Vegas anymore. Not its outskirts. Not anywhere near civilization. The driver slowed the vehicle and pulled off the dirt path, stopping in front of a small, rundown cabin barely illuminated by moonlight. The kind of place that didn't appear on maps, didn't catch cell signals, didn't leave survivors if something happened, but felt safer than any precinct, any undercover room, any secure holding environment we'd ever been in. Because here, finally, no one was watching. The woman didn't explain herself. She didn't need to. She just said, inside. They'll regroup by sunrise, then handed Jordan a set of keys and drove off before any of us could ask why she knew our names. The cabin smelled like cedar and dust and quiet. Real quiet. Not strategic quiet. Not fearful quiet. A type of quiet I didn't know I missed until we stepped into it. Michael collapsed into one of the worn couches, exhausted, eyes closed but not asleep, too tired to speak, too relieved to cry, too alive to fall apart. Jordan stood still in the center of the cabin, like she wasn't sure whether to feel safe or suspicious. She wasn't used to silence.
Neither was I.
But then she looked at me, not at my face, but at my arm. At the blood slowly drying across my sleeve, the cut jagged and deep, ugly, but not lethal. Something changed in her eyes. I don't think I'd ever seen anything so raw in them before, not even during the kiss. Sit, was all she said. Not an order. Not a suggestion. A plea. I sat in an old wooden chair by the fireplace. She disappeared into the small bathroom, returning seconds later with a first aid kit, a towel, and a glass of water. She knelt down in front of me. And for a moment, I forgot that we were fugitives, that we were being hunted, that by sunrise, everything would start again. This moment didn't feel stolen. It felt earned. She didn't speak while she cleaned the wound, though her hands weren't steady. They were too gentle for that. Too slow. Too afraid to hurt me, even when pain would have been easier than pretending. Her fingers brushed against my skin, in places where it didn't hurt, where it didn't bleed, and I couldn't help but notice how careful she was. Not careful like a detective. Careful like someone who hadn't been able to care for anyone in a long time, and was terrified of doing it wrong. We didn't look away from each other. Not once. You ran at him, she finally whispered, her voice barely there. He was going to hit you, I said softly. She shook her head. He was going to hit me. You took it for me. I didn't say anything. Her gaze flickered, confused, angry, emotional. You could have been seriously hurt. I waited before I responded, because I knew my answer would change something. I didn't think, I said quietly. I just moved. She paused. And then she said, even softer, that scares me. Why? Because I would have done the same. The air in the room shifted. She still had one hand on my arm. The other moved up, slowly, until her fingers rested against my pulse. She didn't look at it. She felt it. "I don't know what to do with that," she whispered. "With what?" "With the fact that I can't lose you." My breath stopped. Not because I didn't expect it, but because it was the first time she said it out loud. Not just with her eyes. Not just with her choices. With words. Real, unguarded words. Before I could speak, Michael's voice came from across the room, weak, quiet, but certain. "He wanted you," he said to Jordan. She didn't look at him. "I know. Not just to punish you," Michael continued, voice breaking.
To use you.
"Because you were valuable to him." She exhaled. Slowly. And I realized something I hadn't before. We weren't just running from corrupted officials or criminal networks. We were running from something deeper. Something she knew. "Who is he, Jordan?" I asked quietly. Her eyes didn't move, but everything inside her did. "He wasn't just someone from the case," she whispered. "He wasn't just someone from Michael's past." She swallowed hard, her voice growing quieter, fragile, dangerous. "He was someone from my life." She stood slowly, wrapping her own arms around herself, not to protect from cold, but from memory. "Before San Francisco, before I joined homicide, before I became a detective, there were people like him around my life. My family." "Your family?" I repeated softly. She nodded once. "My father had connections. Not legal ones. Not clean ones." The shame in her voice broke something in me. I spent most of my 20s trying to erase his shadow. Trying to prove I wasn't him. "You weren't." She looked at me then, and I don't think she believed it. Not fully. "He wanted to recruit me," she whispered. "Said I could do more with my mind than just solve cases. Said I could control outcomes, not just react to them." I swallowed. "You said no." "Yes." Her voice dropped, but he didn't take no as an answer. We didn't speak for a long time. Not because there was nothing to say, but because I understood without her saying anything. They didn't just want to kill her. They wanted to break her. Turn her. Use her. Because that was far worse than destroying her. It was claiming her. And suddenly the hunt made sense. They didn't want her gone. They wanted her back. I stood up slowly, despite the pain.
She didn't stop me.
I stepped closer. Close enough to feel her breath, to see the small tremor in her hands, to understand something deeply. She wasn't afraid of them. She was afraid of herself. Of becoming what they wanted. "That's not who you are," I whispered. Her voice broke. "I don't know who I am anymore." "I do." She looked at me, eyes glassy. Not from tears, but from something more fragile.
Hope.
"Who am I then?" I didn't rush. I didn't hesitate. I lifted my hand and rested it against her cheek. Soft, steady, grounding. "You're the woman who stepped into a prison in the dark to find someone everyone else forgot." Her breath caught. "You're the woman who doesn't leave people behind." My voice softened. "You're the woman who makes people feel safe, even when she's not." Her pulse quickened beneath my hand. "You're the woman," I whispered, "who made me remember what it feels like to stay." And for the first time since I had known her, Jordan didn't just look at me. She let me see her. She didn't hide. She didn't hesitate. She did something far riskier. She let herself feel. Her lips parted. Just slightly. Not from surprise. From realization. "Riley," she whispered, voice shaking, not from fear. From truth. "I think I'm..." But I already knew. And the way her hand lifted, the way it found mine, the way she looked at me and didn't look away, I knew she meant it. She finished, not as a confession, but as a promise. "I think I'm falling in love with you." The cabin was silent. For the first time, it didn't feel like danger. It felt like the beginning of something true. But outside, headlights flashed in the distance. They had found us again. And love was no longer just something we felt. It had become something we would have to fight for. The moment the headlights cut through the darkness outside the cabin, casting long beams across the dry land and the cracked windows, the air inside shifted from stillness to urgency. Not panic. Not fear. Something deeper. A realization. Whatever was coming was not coming to scare us, or intimidate us, or warn us. This time it was coming to take us. Jordan had already stepped toward the window, but I could see it in her posture, in the set of her shoulders, that this wasn't strategy anymore. This was instinct, something primal that rose inside her when logic couldn't help.
She did not look at me.
She did not look at Michael. She looked at the door, and her voice was low when she spoke. They found us before sunrise. I stood, ignoring the sharp pull from my injured arm. Pain could wait. Pain wasn't a decision. Survival was. We run. I asked, though I already knew the answer. She didn't nod. She didn't speak. But she looked at me then, and something in her gaze softened. Not weakness, not fear, but certainty. Not just run, she whispered. We don't just survive tonight. We take control of it. Before I could respond, the first door hinge groaned. They weren't pounding. They weren't kicking. They were testing. Because they had time. Because they believed they had already won. Jordan moved faster than I'd ever seen her move. In a single motion, she crossed the room, grabbed Michael by the arm, and guided us to the back exit, a door camouflaged by a hanging quilt and layers of dust. Almost invisible. Almost. They won't expect this one, she murmured, her hand sliding into mine, not tentatively, not accidentally, but with firm, deliberate certainty, grounding me, anchoring me. The touch didn't feel like reassurance. It felt like strategy, like trust, like a promise. We slipped outside into the cold desert air, quiet as ghosts. The back of the cabin opened to an overgrown path and a stretch of land that looked like emptiness, but felt like possibility. The sky had begun to lighten, the faintest suggestion of dawn creeping into the horizon, but it wasn't warm. Dawn in the desert was always coldest. The car we had arrived in was destroyed, but we weren't looking for vehicles anymore. We were looking for shadows. For escape. For terrain that hunters didn't understand as well as survivors. We moved. Slow at first. Then faster. Someone shouted from inside the cabin. They'd realized we were gone. Flashlights cut through darkness. Boots hit gravel. But we were ahead. We crossed a dry riverbed and followed it toward a small ridge. Not tall, but enough to hide us for seconds. And seconds mattered now. Michael stumbled once, almost collapsing, but Jordan caught him, not roughly, not impatiently, but with a kind of fierce tenderness that made my chest tighten. "I've got you," she whispered. And then, softer, to both of us. "We're almost through this." For a moment I believed her. Then gunshots. Not at us. Into the air. Warning shots. They didn't want to kill us. They wanted to stop us. Capture us. Silence us permanently, without bloodshed that could draw attention. They had done this before. But this time, something had changed. This time, we weren't running in confusion or fear. We were running with someone worth protecting. Someone worth saving. Someone who could expose the truth. And maybe that was why the next shot wasn't into the air. It hit the dirt by my foot, kicking dust into my eyes. Too close. I stumbled. My bad arm buckled. Then I felt it, her hand again. Not pulling this time. Supporting. "Stay with me," she said. The same words she had whispered in the car. Only this time they sounded like everything. The ridge ahead looked impossible. Too steep. Too exposed. Too visible. But behind us, floodlights now. Voices. Orders. Countdown. I didn't need instructions. I needed her. I followed. We reached the ridge at the same time the sun began to pierce the black horizon, not gently, but violently. Red, bright, unforgiving. Michael dropped to his knees behind a cluster of dry brush. I followed him, pulling him lower. "We won't outrun them," he said, voice quiet but not panicked. He wasn't afraid anymore. He knew what needed to happen. But they don't expect us to go back toward Vegas. Jordan turned, eyes narrowing. "They expect us to run away," he continued. "But if we go toward the city, toward exposure, toward surveillance, toward records, they lose control." I stared at him, then at her, and I saw it hit her like a signal. We didn't need to run to escape. We needed to run to the one place they wouldn't want us to reach. Visibility.
Noise. Law.
Civilization.
Truth.
I spoke, my voice firm, clearer than I felt. Las Vegas. Not the precinct. Not the police. Jordan's eyes met mine. The Strip, she whispered. Somewhere public. Michael nodded, eyes brightening with an exhausted kind of hope. And fast. The sun rose. Footsteps approached. No more warnings. They were moving in now, before we could reach anything to make us untouchable. Jordan's fingers slid into mine again, this time without hesitation, without calculation. Stay close, she whispered. No matter what happens. And I said it automatically, even through the burn of my arm, through the ache of exhaustion, through the fear pounding in my bones. I won't leave you. She didn't let go of my hand. Not when we moved through the ridge. Not when gunshots got closer. Not when the vehicles began to descend. Not when everything felt too close, too dangerous, too impossible. She did not let go. And in that moment I realized something. She wasn't leading me. She wasn't guiding me. We were choosing. Together. We were no longer running from danger. We were running toward our truth. We reached the broken road just as the sun fully crested the horizon, lighting the expanse of land. And in the distance, we saw it. Glass towers. Casinos. The Strip. An empire of illusion. But also, the one place where no one could afford to be invisible. There, she whispered. And for a moment, just a moment, it felt possible. But then, tires. Engines. Coming from the road behind us. We turned. 3 SUVs. Black. Not speeding wildly. Not charging. Just approaching.
Calm. Certain.
Like this was choreography. Jordan's grip tightened around my hand. And I realized she wasn't afraid for herself. Only for us. He'll be there, Michael whispered behind us, his voice haunting, heavy with the weight of knowledge. He always said the Strip is the safest place to find someone and the easiest place to lose them. She turned.
Who?
Michael didn't hesitate. The man in the coat. She didn't flinch.
She didn't deny. She didn't ask why.
She only said, so quietly it nearly disappeared into the rising wind, my father. The world fell silent, not just around us, inside us. Everything changed. Everything made sense. Everything broke and healed in the same moment. Jordan didn't run. She didn't step back. She didn't look away. She looked at me. Only me. Her voice was soft, unarmored, unafraid. If I go to him, you have to leave. I shook my head. No, if I face him alone, he'll take me.
Not you.
I don't care. You should. I stepped closer. She was shaking, and not just from fear. From decision. From emotion. From love. She didn't try to hide it anymore. Jordan, I whispered. You don't protect me by leaving me. The SUVs stopped. Doors opened. But no one approached. They were waiting. Watching. The father had arrived. Jordan's breath shuddered. I could feel it from how close we were. I can't ask you to stay, she whispered. You don't have to, I said. And then I said the words that changed everything. I already did. She didn't kiss me. She didn't need to. The look in her eyes said it first. Her hand tightened around mine. And this time, she didn't let go. Not because she was afraid, but because she had chosen. The SUVs didn't rush us. They didn't trap us with the force of collision or intimidation. They surrounded us with the slow, deliberate precision of people who believed they were inevitable. The desert sun had fully risen by then, painting gold across the cracked earth, silhouetting each black vehicle with a harsh, unblinking clarity. No neon. No noise. No protection from anonymity. For once, Las Vegas wasn't hiding anyone. It was exposing them. And out there, exposed, was exactly where we needed to be. The rear door of the center vehicle opened. He didn't step out like a man arriving to a confrontation. He stepped out like someone planning to reclaim something that already belonged to him.
Tall. Composed.
Salt and shadow hair, the same steel-green shade of eyes that Jordan carried, but his didn't soften when they looked at her. They measured. They calculated. He walked toward us. No gun raised. No command issued. Men behind him waited, still as statues. He stopped 10 feet away. Close enough to hear breath. Not close enough to touch. His gaze landed not on his daughter, but on me. It lingered. Then he spoke. I don't blame her for what she's done. His voice was calm, disturbingly calm. You were the variable I failed to consider. Jordan stepped in front of me, not because I needed protection, but because she chose to stand there. You don't get to talk to her, she said. There was no tremor, no hesitation. Not anymore. His eyes flickered just once, not with anger, but with something almost curious. So, this is the choice you made. She didn't look back at me. She didn't reach for my hand, but I could feel her with me. Every breath, every heartbeat as she said, it wasn't the hard one. He exhaled quietly, then looked at Michael, standing now, bruised but alive, beside me. You were smarter than I expected, he murmured. Not smart enough to stay away, but smart enough to stay alive. Michael didn't respond. He didn't retreat. He simply stepped forward, not toward the man, but toward her, his sister. Not from fear, from solidarity. There, in the growing light, something unspoken passed between them. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But recognition. The father turned back to Jordan. You could have had power, protection, purpose. His gaze hardened, but never rose in volume. Instead, you chose law, bureaucracy, a system that doesn't deserve you. Jordan didn't blink. I didn't choose the system, she said quietly. I chose the people it protects. Silence. Then, he asked the question he'd been circling around since the first night she stepped away from his world. Do you regret it?
She didn't hesitate.
She didn't look at me. She didn't look at her brother. She simply looked at him and said, softly, but with all the force of every moment she had learned to feel instead of pretend, no, something in him changed, not breaking, not shattering, but folding slightly, like a structure losing the weight that held it rigid. The men behind him shifted, waiting for orders. But he gave none.
Not yet.
His last attempt came quietly, not persuasive, not threatening, almost genuine. You think she'll stay, he said, eyes flicking toward me. You think what you've built is stronger than everything that will come after this. His final words came like a verdict. It won't last. I didn't expect Jordan to look at me, but she did. And I didn't expect her to reach for my hand, not in front of him, not in front of dozens of armed men, but she did. Not out of defiance, not out of desperation, out of certainty. Her fingers laced into mine, and held. Then she spoke, not loudly, not dramatically, but so steadily it felt like a line being drawn across the world. It already has. The world shifted, not with shouts, not with force, but with the kind of stillness that happens when something ends, and something new refuses to be afraid to begin. He didn't step forward again. He didn't order her restrained. He didn't even look at Michael as 2 federal vehicles arrived from the far ridge, sunlight flashing off their windshields, cutting through the dust and silence like the first crack of thunder before a storm. Someone in one of the SUVs must have made the call. Maybe the woman who drove us to the cabin, maybe someone inside his own organization, maybe someone higher. But it didn't matter now, because when the agent stepped out, badges visible, signatures real, weapons holstered, they didn't look at us like fugitives. They looked at us like witnesses. The men in black looked at him, waiting, expecting retaliation, violence, chaos. But control had already slipped, and control, once lost, never returns quietly. Michael turned to the agents, voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. I have information, he said. Evidence. And names. The agents nodded. One of them turned to Jordan. You'll need protective custody. She glanced at me. Not without her. His eyebrows lifted. Not in surprise. In understanding. He nodded once. Then turned to me. That goes for you too. Something eased in my chest. Not relief. Not victory. Something calmer. Something like finally breathing without armor on. The father didn't speak again. He simply looked at his daughter one last time. Not like an enemy. Not like a possession lost. Almost like a reflection that had stepped out of the mirror and walked away. And then, quietly, he turned and walked back to the car. No handcuffs. No chase. No end. But something had broken. Something had ended. And we knew we wouldn't see him again. The sun fully cleared the horizon then, harsh and golden, touching the dirt, the vehicles, the blood, the bruises, the decision. Jordan turned to me. The desert wind pulled at her hair. Her fingers tightened around mine, not in desperation, just in confirmation. We survived, I whispered. She nodded. Now we choose how to live. Michael was speaking to federal agents. Evidence was being gathered. The strip glimmered in the distance, awake now, unaware that its future would hold headlines it wasn't expecting. But in that moment, it wasn't about cases, or networks, or trials. It was about us. She stepped closer, the kind of close she didn't run from anymore. I didn't know how to let someone stay, she whispered, until you didn't ask permission. My hand found her face, not hesitant, not rushed, just real. I'm not asking to stay, I whispered. I'm choosing to. Her breath caught, but she didn't step back. And when she leaned in, forehead against mine, sun rising behind her, I knew. The most important part of this story didn't happen in the tunnels, or in the cabin, or in the desert, or under gunfire. It happened the moment she realized love wasn't something that made her weak. It made her seen. And letting someone see her fully was the bravest thing she ever did. She closed her eyes, and I closed mine.